Yeah, right. So, then I started asking the question, is this whole thing a non-issue? Like, let's say, for example, you got the whole court, it's never going to work. You got the whole, people, you're never going to, unbrainwash. Is this whole thing a non-issue? Right. So, and no, this is not a non-issue. It's a serious matter, both medically and ethically, especially those who understand that life begins at fertilization, and that any act that prevents implantation of a fertilized ovum, an egg here, is abortifacient and violates the moral law, particularly thou shalt not kill, right? So this is a non-issue, right? It really is not, and here's why. So ovulation can still occur, even with proper hormonal contraception. Even with perfect use of combined oral contraceptives, ovulation occurs in 1 or 2 uh, percent of cycles. With progestin-only pill, the rate is much higher, up to 50%. With implants, ovulation is rare, but still possible. So yeah, so some women ovulate, right? Um, some eggs are released and fertilization can occur. And fertilization does not equal pregnancy in modern medical definitions, right? So the current medical definition says pregnancy begins at implantation, that the woman is pregnant. No, it's not the baby who's a baby; it's the woman who's pregnant, right? So that's where that's just it's just not true, right? It is just not true. So again, right? So the pregnancy begins at implantation. That's not true, right? It's fertilization the beginning of a pregnancy. Um, I read this again. So the current medical definition says pregnancy begins at implantation, not fertilization. This redefinition hides the truth. A new human being, baby boy or baby girl, may already exist after fertilization. Right? Therefore, blocking implantation can be violently killing a human embryo, even if it's not called an abortion, under current medical or legal terms. The endometrial effect is intentionally overlooked. Hormonal contraceptives thin the uterine lining, the endometrium, making it inhospitable for implantation. If fertilization has already occurred because ovulation slipped through, the embryo may be prevented from implanting and die. That's not contraception. That's potentially an early abortion. Uh, so the loophole is semantic and legal, not scientific or moral. The products are not labeled abortifacient because fertilization isn't considered the start of pregnancy in modern medical policy. This allows pharmaceutical companies, FDAs, and all those kinds of people to avoid moral, legal, and consumer backlash. But those who believe life begins at fertilization, that distinction is meaningless, right? Those who believe there's no such a thing as belief. I mean, this is who know that. Um, sure, okay. Those who believe that, and just because you believe doesn't mean it's not true, right? So this, that's the reason why I'm careful to say, well, we believe it to be true, but it is, yes, we believe it to be true because it is true, and it is also true. It is true, and some people would go there and say, oh, that's what you believe, implying that it's not true, but this is true. We believe it, and it is also true. Right? Um, so just because we believe it doesn't mean it's not true, right? That's nonsense. But they will actually put forth that argument. Oh, that's just what you believe, right? And what I believe is what is true, right? So and the people that will put forth that argument will say, well, you believe that. What I believe, and they will actually, falsely assert, right? They will falsely assert that whatever they believe is the truth. Well, it's not. They're believing a lie, right? People are not informed. Most women and even many doctors, well, I don't know about that. I do believe they know, but whatever. Even many doctors do not realize that hormonal contraceptives can allow fertilization and may work by preventing implantation. I don't know. I don't know that to be true, right? I would. Let's be cautious about that one. Uh, let's just be cautious. Most women do not realize that hormonal contraceptives can allow fertilization and may work by preventing implantation because their doctors were to lie to them, basically. Informed consent is not truly informed. Right? Very good. This is a profound moral failure, especially for Christians. Not just Christians, right? You got all kinds of religious background, or there's a vast majority of the world have some sort of faith or anything. They're not all extremist, feministic, atheistic, creationists. Sorry, evolutionists, right? Sorry about that. That's what I meant at all. I meant evolutionists. So there's a vast majority of the population are of some sort of there's some sort of faith, there's some sort of faith, right? There's some sort of religion, and most people are not interested in killing a baby, right? And if they know that this is actually killing a baby, they would be against it. But there's no informed consent, and the doctor will blur the line and muddy the waters, if you will. Um, all right, so let me say that again, right? Especially for, so what I was going to say was, not everybody is an atheistic, feminist, Darwinism, extremist, extremist, right? These people are far left extremists, right? Extreme leftists, right? That are really interested in destroying, life itself, and killing a baby at the earliest possible, right, form, right? And if they can't get it at the implantation states, they're going to fight for the quote unquote right, right, and we'll talk about that. The quote unquote right to have an abortion, right? That this is never a right. You can never make a crime, right? Thou shalt not kill, right? This is a crime. You're killing somebody. This is a crime. Nobody's going to have the right to kill anybody. There's no right. You cannot have the right to have a crime. Um, you can have a permission, to do something unlawful. Okay, there's only a permission. It is now permissible. It's decriminalized, if you will. So then it's absolutely not a non-issue, right? So it is a deeply significant ethical and spiritual matter, especially for those who follow biblical commandments and believe every human life, right, from fertilization onward, must be protected. The quietness of the issue in public discourse is not a sign that it's minor, it's a sign that it's conveniently ignored. All right, so this answers the question: is this a non-issue? It's easy to, to suggest, this is a non-issue. All right, let's move on. All right, but is it really? Well, I would agree that it certainly is not. It's a serious matter. I mean, we should treat it as such. But if people are not willing to treat it as a serious matter, they're, as soon as they hear about it, they run away, or they turn 180 degrees away. They run. They cannot partake in this conversation. It's incredible. This is the number one conversation that they cannot have. And for some reason, their brains cannot process it. Any other conversation about whatever kind of sports or weather or any kind of small talk like that. But they cannot handle this type of, 10 out of 10 religion and politics, right? They just can't do it, right? Thank you very much for tuning in. I'll see you in the next video.